Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a really fascinating historical moment. It's one that, maybe surprisingly, holds some powerful lessons for how we navigate things today.
It really does. We're looking at the story of the Jewish people returning from the Babylonian exile.
Right, and it's not just a history lesson, is it? It's about how this community faced, well, an existential crisis, really.
Exactly, and how they made some radical choices that completely transformed their identity and ultimately secured their future.
Our mission here is to dig into the historical context that often gets missed, because if you miss it, the whole meaning of sow what you reap in the story just gets twisted or, lost.
Absolutely. The sources we're looking at provide this incredible, almost behind-the-scenes view. It challenges a lot of the surface-level understanding of this period.
So let's start at the beginning, the return itself. It's often described with this huge wave of joy, right? A second Exodus, even.
Definitely. You hear it powerfully in Psalm 126. We were like dreamers. There was this immense hope, this feeling of liberation after decades of exile.
This is pure elation.
Pure elation. But then they arrive. And that euphoria crashes headfirst into a really harsh reality.
What did they actually find when they got back?
Desolation. The land around Jerusalem, their home, was just devastated. Forget large-scale farming or raising livestock. The basics were incredibly difficult, almost impossible in places.
So not exactly the promised land flowing with milk and honey at that moment.
Not at all. Their first thought wasn't rebuilding the temple in glory. It was, how do we eat tomorrow? Basic survival.
Okay, so if farming is out, what's left? How do they survive?
Well, the only viable path really was commerce, engaging in trade with the peoples already living in and around the region.
Just simple trade, buying and selling.
But that's where it gets complicated. See, commerce back then wasn't like, going to the market today. It wasn't just economic.
How so? What else was involved?
It was deeply tangled up with religious and social customs. Doing business often meant, acknowledging the gods of your trading partners.
Acknowledging their gods, how would that work?
Yeah. It could mean anything from participating in certain festivals or rituals to simply invoking their deities in oaths or contracts. Things essential for building trust in trade relationships.
Wow. Okay, for a strictly monotheistic people, that's a massive problem right there.
A fundamental conflict.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop there. Another layer was strategic intermarriage.
Marrying outside the community
Yeah.
for business.
Exactly. Families would arrange marriages between different groups to solidify alliances, ensure debts were honored, smooth over trade routes. The sources are quite blunt. They describe it almost like a form of, hostage exchange.
Hostage exchange.
Yeah.
That's stark. It really drives home the pressure they were under.
Immense pressure. So you have this impossible choice. Do you compromise your unique faith, the very core of your identity, just to survive? Or do you stick to your principles and potentially starve?
An unbearable choice. It sounds like a situation crying out for strong leadership.
Which brings us to Nehemiah.
Nehemiah,
Yeah.
right. Most people probably know him as the guy who rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem.
He did rebuild the walls, absolutely. But the key piece of information, the context that changes everything about how we understand his actions, is something often overlooked in popular telling.
Okay, what is it?
Nehemiah wasn't just a local Jewish leader organizing volunteers. He was the Persian Empire's appointed governor, a Tirshatha, or governor.
Appointed by Persia. That's a huge difference.
It's massive. He wasn't just relying on charisma. He wielded the full authority of the Persian Empire in that region.
So what did that mean, practically? What powers did he have?
As the emperor's man on the ground, he had administrative power, judicial power. He could levy taxes, enforce laws, command resources. He even had authority in religious matters, to some extent. And crucially, he had the backing material and military of the empire.
Okay, so his decrees weren't just suggestions. They were law.
Precisely. And understanding that he's operating with imperial authority is absolutely critical. Without it, his later actions seem inexplicable, maybe even just cruel. But with it, you see a strategy playing out, backed by immense power.
So with this power, what did he actually do? What were these reforms?
They were radical.
Yeah.
And swift. First, he moved to eradicate all signs of religious syncretism, foreign idols, practices that blended Jewish faith with others all out. Complete purification.
Okay, getting rid of idols, that seems sort of expected, maybe? But there was more, wasn't there? Something much tougher.
Yes. The most shocking measure, the one that causes so much debate, was his order demanding that Jewish men divorce their foreign wives.
Divorce them, even if they had children together.
Even with children, yes. It sounds incredibly harsh and undoubtedly caused immense personal suffering and social chaos in the short term.
And this wasn't just him urging people, this was an order.
It was an imperial decree handed down by the governor, enforced as law. This wasn't Nehemiah the priest pleading, this was Nehemiah the governor commanding.
Wow, the human cost must have been staggering. And thinking logically, cutting off these ties, these marriages often linked to trade. Wouldn't that risk starvation? Didn't they need that commerce?
That's the immediate logical reaction, isn't it? You're cutting off your lifeline. How could this possibly lead to anything good? It seems counterproductive, even suicidal, from a purely economic standpoint.
So what was the thinking? How did this drastic, painful action supposedly help?
This is where we see the long game. Nehemiah's actions, however brutal they seem, were about closing off all paths to compromise. He was essentially forcing the community back onto their foundational principles, their covenant law, the Torah. It was like burning the bridges to easy solution.
Burning the bridges, cutting off the escape routes that involved compromising their identity.
Exactly. Forcing them to find another way, their way, rooted in their core beliefs. No more blending, no more relying on the compromises that trade demanded.
Okay, that's a radical strategy. What happened? Did they just collapse, starve?
Here's the astonishing part. No, the sources indicate that roughly a century later, something remarkable had happened.
What?
The Jewish community wasn't just surviving, it was flourishing, academically and economically.
Flourishing? How? After cutting themselves off?
Jerusalem became this renowned center of learning and intellectual activity. Some accounts suggest it even began to rival Alexandria in Egypt as an intellectual hub.
Rival Alexandria? That's incredible. And economically?
They accumulated significant international wealth. Not just subsistence, but real prosperity.
Okay, I'm lost. How did they pull that off? If they weren't trading in the old way, where did the wealth and intellectual boom come from?
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Forced off the path of easy compromise, they turned inward. They intensely focused on the study and application of Torah, their sacred texts and laws.
So religious study led to economic prosperity. How does that work?
It wasn't just about prayer. This intense focus on Torah study dramatically raised the community's overall intellectual capacity. Remember, literacy, deep reading, and interpretation skills. These were elite skills back then.
Okay, so they developed intellectual capital.
Precisely. And they leveraged it. Instead of just trading basic goods or relying on those compromising alliances, they started innovating, developing unique, high-quality products and specialized skills. Think of it like a modern, strong, small business that competes on quality and technological edge, not just price or connections.
Like specialized craftsmanship or knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Things that were so good, so unique, that other nations wanted them and were willing to pay cash. This bypassed the whole complex, messy system of credit, collateral, and religiously intertwined trade agreements.
Yeah.
Straightforward transactions for high-value goods.
And that led to the wealth.
That directly contributed to their significant wealth accumulation. They weren't just surviving, they had created a new economic engine based on their unique strengths. Strengths cultivated by adhering to their principles.
So this completely reframes sow what you reap, doesn't it? It's not just pray and get rich.
Not at all. It's far from any kind of simple prosperity gospel. The seed they sowed was God's law, the Torah. But the sowing wasn't passive prayer. It was the active, painful, difficult cultivation of that law through intense effort, study, and adherence, even amidst suffering.
That dedication, that difficult choice to stick to principles, that's what yielded the unexpected harvest.
Exactly. The principle, lived out through hardship, created the conditions for a different kind of success. A success they likely couldn't have imagined when Nehemiah was issuing those harsh decrees.
It really underscores how crucial that context is. Without knowing Nehemiah was a governor, without understanding the realities of ancient trade.
His actions just look pointlessly cruel, or the story gets reduced to, he built a wall. You miss the entire strategic depth, the profound gamble on principle.
And it's a classic warning, isn't it, about reading any historical text, or maybe even news today, without digging into the context.
Absolutely. We can easily misinterpret motivations, actions, outcomes if we ignore the specific circumstances. It's a universal pitfall, and one we should be mindful of in how we process information all the time.
So, reflecting on all this, it seems the core takeaway is this kind of paradox.
That sticking to fundamental principles, even when it's incredibly painful in the short term, even when it seems counterintuitive,
can actually open up completely new possibilities down the road, possibilities you couldn't reach through compromise.
Right.
The moment of greatest danger, of potential collapse, became the catalyst for reinvention and flourishing.
And maybe it suggests that true blessing or growth isn't about having an easy life with no problems.
But it's found in the process, in facing the difficulties, wrestling with them, and finding a way through based on core values.
I think so. That the sowing and the reaping happen within that struggle, within that active engagement with challenges, guided by principle.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a really potent question to think about.
If this principle that sowing based on core values, even through difficulty, yields a harvest, isn't just some old story, but an active force.
Then what seeds should you be planting right now? In your own life, in your work, in society? What difficult cultivation might lead to an unexpected flourishing later on?
Someone to really ponder.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.